Hello.
Hey, how's it
Oh,
going?
hey, we got it working in the first try. Actually, I'm
Oh,
already on stream, so don't just to.
I can't actually see you at the moment though, so I'm just
Yeah,
trying to figure out.
actually, I kind of have to get my second mic. I forgot that I can't see it while I'm live streaming as well.
Oh, cool. How are
So,
you? Nice to meet you.
yeah, nice to meet you. It's such a pleasure. Thank you that we actually made it work. I was kind of worried, to be honest, because, well, actually, you're from Australia, right? You have to which time do we have right now?
It's not exactly late here. It's only 8 o'clock in the evening.
Okay, okay.
But I'm this is almost basically my bedtime.
Yeah, I
So I
can imagine.
yeah, so I work. I moved back to Australia early this year. I'm still pretty much working LA hours. So
Oh,
like my alarm goes off at like 4 or 4:30 in the morning. Sometimes
yikes!
earlier if I've got early meetings, just to try and have as much crossover as possible. And then we've got two small kids, so like
Oh boy!
get woken up at least once or twice each night. So sleep is pretty precious at the moment.
Okay, okay. Holy
so
moly! I didn't expect that one, but okay, yeah, makes sense.
so if I start to doze off, just shout at me
Ah,
and
yeah,
I'll
no
wake up.
worries. I got the chit chat hanging in there as well. Yeah, I will just grab the second cam. You can see me as well. I will be back in like 20 seconds because I actually it's right here. I just see the cable.
No
Um,
worries. I'll take the moment to
y-
have a sip of tea.
yeah, do that. I will be
I'll
right
mute
back.
mute myself so you're not all hearing me slurping away. Got very quiet. I can't actually hear anything at
Uh,
the moment. Oh, there you are.
so I'm back.
You're back.
Actually, me and my girlfriend are both streamer, so sometimes it's a bit tricky to find webcams laying around because someone used
Oh,
them.
gotcha.
And I asked where it is, and she moved to the bathroom, and I was kind of concerned about that because I was actually I took a shower this morning and I didn't see a webcam, so well, yeah, about that. So
Has your viewer count gone soaring up after this morning?
yeah. Let's hope it was this way and not the other way around. But I have to hide you for a second to actually activate my cam as well. So, yay, this works right. It's not the most pretty cam to be honest, but at least you can
I,
see me, I believe.
awesome.
Oh, you
I
also
see the
see my mess. My
I see
Twitch
the
chat never see it.
too.
Oh yeah, my Twitch chat only sees like this and think my room is perfect organized and not all this stuff. This is all the technical equipment laying around, and
Yeah, right.
you know how it is. Our thinking like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
we'll fix this tomorrow or next week or next month, and then
Of
yeah.
course. Of
Okay,
course.
but let's start
Yeah.
with your background. Actually, not only is there the book that we want to talk about a bit, also I would like to start with a hobby of yours. Because I
Mm.
stalked you, obviously, and I saw that you're actually heavily invested into Warhammer universe as well, right? I mean, we see a little part of it behind you, but from what
Yeah,
I
you
could
can
see,
see.
there's quite some stuff.
Yeah, you can see some toy soldiers in the background there. I've got way too many toy soldiers, and some of my books I've done for Black Library around the place as well. Um, that's where I started my career. So I've been at Riot for about 8.5 years. Um, but like back like 20 plus years ago, where I started my career was actually at Games Workshop. So
Okay.
like I grew up in Australia, went to university here in Australia, but I've got dual citizenship. Oh, well, actually, I've got tri-citizenship now. I've got UK citizenship and I'm an American citizen as well now. So when I finished university, I did something which is very typical for a lot of Australians, is to go, I have no idea what I want to do. Like I did at uni, I did like all the creative writing that I could, and like studied mythology and history, and just did things that I thought were interesting. But at the end of it, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to do for a job. I had no concept, no idea that I could really make a living as a writer. So I kind of went, I'll stall. I'll go backpacking around Europe for a year or two and work in some pubs and just see what happens, kind of thing. And ended up, I played toy soldier games. I played Warhammer and role playing games and D&D and all that kind of stuff as a kid. And I was like, I know that Games Workshop's like head office is in Nottingham. I'll just turn up to Nottingham and go and have a look at it and see if I can see what happens. And ended up snagging myself a job there and ended up staying there for 6.5 years.
6.5.
Yeah.
What did
Yeah.
you
So
exactly do over there? Did you actually work as a writer or anything related to that?
yeah. Yeah. I started I started like as the very first thing I did there was actually just taking orders on the phone. Like it was coming up to Christmas. I got a temp job just doing some phone orders. I knew their product, so they liked me. So I was just basically calling up the different workshop stores and taking their store orders. But while I was there, I got chatting to a few different folks and ended up having a coffee with one of the senior games designers there. And whatever I said impressed him enough somehow to say, all right, well, why don't I get you a temp job in the design studio? So I started working on their monthly magazine and writing a few things for the web for them. But it was only a month long, so I did it for a little while. But they were like, we don't really have a job for you because like you can write, but like we need people that know how to lay out magazines. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that kind of stuff. That's not my forte. But at the time, like a job came up to become an assistant games designer.
Okay.
And I managed to get that. And then so I started writing, like working as a games designer. At the time, those roles were kind of a split between writing the tabletop toy soldier rules and doing the background for the books as well. So it's like it was a lot of writing and a lot of games design as well. So you were doing both. Now they're a bit more split. So the writers write and the games developers do the games, but you did a bit of both back then. So I did that for years. I worked there for like 4 years designing games and writing stuff and having an absolute blast and learning an awful lot from really talented people, because that was like my first full-time role. I didn't know what I was doing. But I had great mentors. And yeah, I did that for 4 years, and then I moved into management in the design studio and was managing their art team actually. So I was the art and design manager. So I was managing like the artists, the illustrators, the figure painters, the like the graphic designers and whatnot. And sort of got more and more into writing on the side while I was doing that until I ended up going full-time freelance as a writer.
So it was actually from there to freelance to write? Because actually, I mean, Nottingham, Dublin, I mean, this is quite a distance. And also, right, in the early days, wasn't really headhunting people, or how did you end up there?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't right in Dublin. I went from Sydney, Australia, to England to Nottingham, worked there for a while, for those 6.5 years, came back to Australia and worked freelance for quite a few years. And then I also did a couple of I did 1 or 2 years working kind of like so-called real jobs, going like, maybe I need to have something more steady.
Yeah,
so
I know that feeling.
Became like an editor for a marketing agency for a little while, and it was kind of soulless and horrible. And it's like, it's much more fun getting to write about yordles and goblins and whatnot. And yeah, so I did a couple of freelance jobs, like working in the games industry and just sort of putting my feelers out a little bit. And yeah, it was after that I ended up coming across to Riot in LA. So
it was actually LA already back then.
It was LA. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was in so we were in LA for most of my time at Riot up until earlier this year when we moved back to Australia.
Man, so you actually traveled the world quite a bit, to be honest, right? I mean,
Yeah, I've been very lucky. And with workshop and with Bright as well, I've had the opportunity to travel and see different countries and stuff, and it's great. It's amazing, and it's like it's eye opening, and it sort of gives you an appreciation for things as well. Yeah, so I've been very lucky.
yeah, perfect. So, one thing that actually came to my mind quite often in the last days was something that I promoted this as the first League of Legends fantasy roman we ever had. It's like the first book about it. And actually, I always thought about the older book he actually wrote about it, featuring Garen. I think it was only an ebook. I'm not sure if it's actually a print version, at least not in German. Maybe it was printed in
It
English.
was just an ebook.
Do we
Everywhere.
hide that away, or is this because wasn't this like the first one actually?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think technically Ruination is the first novel.
Ah,
So
okay, okay.
the Garen one was a novella, so it was like a novella is around 30,000 words, whereas a novel can be like 70,000 words plus ish. Ruination is like I think it's 120,000 words or something like that. So the Garen one was it was a book, but it wasn't a full on novel. So
Yeah, okay.
yeah, technically this is the first novel, and it's the first one that's in print. Like I mean, that's it feels more real. Like when you get something you can hold and you can look at and you can flick
Yeah.
through. It feels a lot more real than sort of an intangible ebook.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So, do you actually play League of Legends? Like, do you enjoy the right games in general? Maybe.
I do. Yeah, and I played League for years before I started at Riot as well. I was playing Riot from season 2, I think it was.
Oof.
Like not playing very well, and I was playing in Australia, and it was with shitty, sorry, excuse me, bad internet connections, and so like I was always apologizing. Oh, sorry, I'm in Australia. And everyone's like, what? Because we didn't have our own servers and stuff back then. Um, but yeah, I do. I do. I don't play particularly competitively. I don't play ranked. But I do enjoy it. I play quite a bit of TFT. I mostly play these days. I play mostly ARAM, which I really enjoy. You can jump in there. You can play a game pretty quick, and like it's a really fun way of just getting to know lots and lots of different champs. I played so much of that I found that going back to Summer's Rift was like actually I do much better once it gets to like team fights and stuff than I do in the regular laning phase, because I'm just much more used to now just the big all-in combats and stuff. But yeah, no, I do play. I tended to play um, top. I started playing a bit more jungle. I was enjoying playing jungle. Really liking like Echo. I think my most played champ though are the ones I've got the highest like played the most. Really, it was like top laners and stuff. Urgot, Volibear. But I love playing Echo. I love playing play a bit of Warwick. Yeah.
But
So yeah, I do play it quite a lot. It's a good way I found of getting to understand like the champions. Like I always, whenever I'm writing about a champion, I want to understand them, and I want to understand as also like not just their background and their lore and their story, but I also like to understand what it feels like to play them, and like not to fill stories with all of their abilities, because they're like a character in fiction shouldn't just be doing the abilities from League, but understand like the feeling of them, and like what it is that players love about them, and like those high moments, the exciting things. They've got some great VO. It's a great way of listening to their VO to really think about like what they're saying, and interactions and stuff like that. Um,
yeah, I
yeah,
see
I, I
that.
I find if you do that, if you do the research and you understand the characters and you understand what it just comes across as a lot more genuine, I think, when you're writing them. Like I always want to make sure that like players that are reading any of my stories or anything go, oh yeah, this guy gets it. Like he knows what he's talking about. He understands this world. He understands these characters. He understands how they act and how they move and things like that. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you started to do freelance with Riot 8 years ago, I believe, or was it
No,
already?
no, no, straight into full time.
Oh, okay. Because
Yeah.
back then, I play League since before season 1, actually. So I also enjoyed all the really, let's say, questionable lore choices we had back then, and the whole makeover, however you want to call it, remake of the whole lore, and everyone just was evil or something for quite some time because people dicked all that around. Did you actually have your hands in there as well? Like, it was this something you were part of changing all this, and how do you look back on the old lore, maybe?
Yeah, I was. So when I started, it was some months after I started when that whole transition was happening. So I was kind of there through that process, and it was exciting. It was, uh, but it was also difficult. Like it's hard. It's like change is always difficult. Like, and especially if you've invested a lot of time into something, to then have it feel like it's being pulled out from under you, and all the time that you've spent reading about this stuff and getting invested in it, and to find that that's actually all going away, that doesn't feel good. Like even if something is changing for the better, it still never feels good because it feels like that was a bit of a waste of my time. So that just sucks, just generally. I strongly feel that it was the right decision because it opens things up an awful lot more. Like the 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 whole kind of story, like the whole the summoners and all of that kind of stuff with the Institute of War and everything. It was a cool idea, and I think it would have been a cool idea if all Riot ever did with the IP was to stick to just to league them over, because it works for that. But as soon as you start thinking about telling other types of games, or like stories through other types of games, or telling deeper stories or longer form stories, it became really limiting. It was hard to think of like, do we want to read it? Do you want to see a movie about that's just involved with that, or like, hey, maybe one would be cool. What if you wanted to see multiple of them? But it's like every time the conflict has to get resolved in this in the Summoner's Rift, and it's like I think it would get old very quick. Plus, it always felt a little bit like the champions, because they were the puppets essentially of the summoners. Like the summoners were fighting out their proxy wars through these meat puppets in Summoner's Rift. So it meant that the champions themselves didn't have enough. They didn't have their own agency. You know, like it wasn't. They weren't directing their own lives. They weren't the masters of their own fates. It was being controlled. And you go, that's not that's not a particularly inspiring story. You know, like I'd much rather read a story about a character who's like forging their own path and facing difficult choices and having to make difficult decisions, and you know, going through heartbreak and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of meaty stuff. And couldn't really do that with the older story. So yeah, it was kind of it was a difficult transition, but it was for the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
And
would
there was still
heavily
some cool.
agree.
There was some really cool stuff in the old lore too. I mean, it gets a little bit maligned, but there was some great stuff in there. I always like to sort of, where you can and do it effectively, is like reference stuff that's really old, just to keep like those players that know it and will recognize and go, oh, that's cool. That's a little nod to something really old, which is always fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, these are the Easter eggs that actually you feel so rewarded to be a veteran. It's like you feel that pride to actually know this Easter egg. And I think it's yeah, really beautiful. I think one thing that I really enjoyed in the past, and I never met anyone noticing it because it was so old. But back in the days, we had in the forum, I believe, like a newspaper once a month or something with actually lore happening, going around Veigar beating Khazadin or something. And I really loved that one. Not sure if you were around back then, but I loved that particular really, really much.
I was a fan at that point, so that's when I was like I was reading that stuff.
Yeah, same. I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
yeah.
But
It was
let's
fun. There was some really quirky stuff in there. There was some stuff in there that we go, well, that's a bit weird, but there was some gold in there.
Yeah, definitely. But I also would totally agree that it was really important to change stuff because the IP gives so much more right now. And I think this is something that Riot really wants to leverage. And we saw that with Arcane, I believe. Arcane was obviously like the big punch for the mainstream media. But I think Actually, a book is like pretty much the same, right? I sent Arcane to my best friends, telling them, "Watch this. I know you don't play League, but watch this. It's really good." And I actually bought a book for my parents because I was like, "Hey, read this. This it's League of Legends, right? You to play, but you can understand it." But at the same time, I think the IP is also something really challenging, right? Because you have to write a book. You obviously was involved in Ruination in general, I believe, like the whole lore event. But then you have to write a book, and you're like, okay, how much freedom do you actually get? How much could you write? Because I personally, I don't want to spoil it too much, but I was heavily impressed how many champs you were allowed to reference. I imagine like obviously Viego, like we have to spot that. Kalista, obvious choice. Sure, then you can't miss Hickory, but you actually got like 5 more or something. So how is it to write for such a big IP, and how hard is this actually to talk to the people about how you want to change maybe small details and stuff?
It is definitely challenging. When I was originally started to think, like, this was years ago, I'd had dreams about I had different novel pitches that I'd floated around the company at different points about, oh, we should tell stories about this, or maybe we could do like this. And I'd always thought that Ruination would be a great story. Slight detour. One of the things that was really cool and made me really excited to be able to tell this story was that Kalista was the first champion that I worked on when I first joined Riot. That was basically the thing I was doing from day one in Riot was like, cool, okay, now this is the champ, not because I was working on the champs team. So working out Callista's backstory and who she was and like how she became like that and what happened to the Shadow Isles was one of the first things that I had a chance to play around with, which was really cool. Obviously it changed a bit over the years, but like the rough framework was still there. But yeah, it is definitely a challenge. There was sorry, my own detour confused me there for a second. So where I was going with that was when I was originally thinking about like how this would be a great story, there wasn't really any other teams playing around in that space so much. But then as we sort of went, yeah, let's do this book, it was like it's became a lot more complicated because there was like, okay, Viego was being developed as a champ, and his personality, his backstory and stuff was being developed. The Ruined King game was being worked on. So there were all these different moving parts. That there was the league, like Ruination event was going on, and all these different parts of the company were working on these things that were all meant to connect. So it was like it was tricky at times, being like, yeah, this is the outline for the book. It's like, oh, hang on, this is what's happening over here. We better change this and change this. And it was like there were tricky moments. And actually, I think it actually strengthened the book because I got to include a bunch of stuff in there that I wouldn't have considered otherwise. And like things like back in the day, the idea of the Ruined King as a character, we hadn't really formed who he was like back then. It was like, yeah, he's this. The rough story beats were there about like him, his wife, you know, getting hit with poison. He's desperately trying to find the cure. He's descending into madness along the way, and Callista's quest. But who he was we didn't have a name for him. We didn't know like what he looked like, how old was he, what did he do. So like the development of Viego was really cool because it was like, okay, cool, sweet, we can use that and build off that. And then like, you know, things like Gwen were being developed. So go, okay, cool, we can put little nods into things like that. So it's I always say, like, working in a big shared IP like this, it's a great privilege because it's like these characters are like a big part of a lot of people's lives, and it's like people love these characters. So it's like an honor to be able to get to play with them. It's also a big responsibility to not screw it up. Like I don't want someone to read like an expression of a character and go, ah, that's my favorite champ, and I don't like the way you're doing them, and they don't sound right, or you're just making him act like in doing things that I don't think they would actually do as a character. So like there's a little bit of pressure on it in terms of that. But it's really fun. Like I really enjoy it. It's like I love this IP as well, and I've been a big part of it. It was like I was enjoying this IP before I came to Riot. I've been at Riot for quite a long time, so I've been invested in this IP for quite a number of years now. So yeah, no, it's a lot of fun, but it is a bit of effort as well to make sure things are lining up. Like I'd wanted to try and make sure that we weren't contradicting things in different places as well, to try and go like, let's make sure that this feel, if for those, like, the book was designed to be able to be read as a standalone thing. Like you said, like, for someone that doesn't know the IP, they should still be able to pick it up and read it and understand what's going on. But for those people that are more invested and know the background, have been reading about this IP for years, and maybe have tried all these other, like, played Ruin King, played, like, understood who Viego was, all this kind of stuff. I also wanted to make sure that there was stuff in there to reward them for that. You know what I mean? Like, not so many references that if you didn't get those references, you're feeling excluded, or you're feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm on the outer because I don't get all the references. Like, that's a bad experience. But, like, just trying to weight it enough that there is enough things in there for those people that know the IP to be able to go, oh, that's cool. Oh, I like that. That connects to here. Oh, that's a reference to this old thing. Or, even things like, oh, that's the name of an old item. Oh, that's cool. Little things like that, I think, like, just, I don't know, make it cool. I'm a big nerd. Like, I love in the IPs that I love when I can see those connection points between different products and go, I've read the comic and I've watched the thing and I've read this and I understand what that reference means. You go, I feel good now because I get it.
Yeah, I can understand that. Also,
Yeah.
I was this was actually one of my biggest fears or something, because I was heavily invested in the Ruination event. I did, like, for the German crowd, I did, I think, 2 YouTube videos where I put all the strings together and tried to tell the whole story. So I was like, yeah, Ruination. This was gonna be surprising. Like, I was pretty sure that I know pretty much all about the book from the get go. So I started reading, and obviously you had to start somewhere. And I was already concerned about where do you start, actually, because I think it's so hard. For me personally, I really enjoyed all the political aspects, and I think it was I actually had the privilege to read a bit out of the book, out of the German version, and I actually picked the part, for example, where Hikarim is talking about what actually the audience needs, how else all the political game is. So I was also really excited about all this. Vigo was actually not the firstborn son, was like the second one, didn't really care about it, had to get into it. So I was like, okay, will he start there? Because then we have, like, a lot of story that I already know before we actually start to see any action. You probably have to time warp at some point because it doesn't get that far. So how did you actually decide which moment you have to start? Because I think there was a huge timeline and you have to pick like this or something. So can you any insight about that?
Yeah, definitely. It was something that we had to be quite conscious of and kind of ruthless with, because I think if we wanted to do that bigger story, like tell a lot more of that early stuff, and then, like, I could see also we could have done a lot more with, like, stretched out Callista's quest kind of further and had her doing a lot more stuff. That could have been 2 books, could have been 3 books, but we only wanted to do 1 book, so it was like, okay, I have to be quite concise with what we're telling, and being quite ruthless with, like, what needs to be in this story. Like, what are the most essential moments and what are the, like, most essential beats to make this story make sense. So yeah, like, picking where to begin. I mean, it's hard without telling too many spoilers, but, like, I needed to get to the sort of inciting incident of, like, what happens to Isolde, which kicks off the whole quest, because this is essentially, at the heart of it, is Callista's story, really. So it's Calista needs to be off and doing stuff pretty quick. So, like, the early part of the book was really, like, trying to go, what's a good way to sort of introduce these characters and give you a pretty quick understanding about who they are, or at least who they are at the beginning of the story, and have some cool moments, but give you all the information that so you understand, like, with what follows, that it makes sense for these characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really wanted to sort of get to the action pretty quick, but not so quick that you're just thrown in and going like, what the hell's going on? This doesn't make any sense. So needed to establish things, like, the key things to establish was, like, who Callista was, her relationship with Viego, what Viego was like as a person, I really wanted to introduce Ledros really, really quick and sort of introduce the idea of like Kallista's relationship with Ledros and with Hecarim to cause a little bit of disruption in a sense there, or like a bit of her difficulty,
Yeah.
like her situation. And yeah, sort of just kick things off from there. And then like the aim was really to try and get things moving, and then it becomes just like this inevitable roll towards the sort of spoiler tragic finale. Yeah, but I had to be very careful along while writing as well. I do sometimes have a tendency to write too much, and like sometimes get away with that if something is just a short story that's appearing on the universe site or the web or something. But when you go with a book, you can't really stretch it too far without like going, okay, we got to add more pages to the book, etc., etc. This causes logistical problems. So it was an exercise of restraint to try and keep pulling myself back, and like there were certain parts that I went, I'm gonna have to cut certain things. There were certain ideas that go, does this need to be in there? Maybe not. Let's sort of pull that back a little bit. Yeah.
How much time do you actually work on the book? Because I can imagine in such a big company you have like a million feedback moments and go back to that, get it shorter, get a bit longer. We need this, we change this. So, would you say? How long did you actually work on it?
I was writing the first draft of this 2 years ago.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think of the exact time frame. It took me about 4.5 months, 5 months, I think. About 4.5 months to do the first draft. And that was finished up by Christmas time 2 years ago. Then it took, but I did multiple like versions. So like that was the first draft. That's the big marathon. You know, doing the first draft is always, it's a hard slog, and you have moments like, I've always likened it to running a marathon. I've never actually run a marathon, so I don't know what the hell I'm talking about really. But it's like you need to do the pre-work, the training for it, like, and that's a lot of that work, because that was 4.5 months of writing time, but I spent quite a lot of time before that. It was probably 6 months or so getting all the story worked out and agreed upon. So as well as having like feedback loops on the writing of the book, we also went through lots of feedback on the outline. So it's like from like the initial pitch paragraph, kind of like, it's a book about X. Key characters are these,
Yeah.
Cool, we like the sound of that. Let's develop that up a bit further, until I developed up like a page by page, sorry, not page by page, a chapter by chapter breakdown of like, this is how many chapters I think the book's going to be. This is all what happens basically in every chapter, half a page or so.
Sure.
And that's a good guideline. You don't ever stick to it completely.
Sure.
But it was like, it's like my safety line. So like when you're in the middle of things, I'm going, what the hell am I doing? What's going next? I can refer back to that. Oh yeah, this is the things that need to happen in this chapter. Things change. Like in the initial outline, I didn't have certain characters even named. Like the sea captain Venix, she was mentioned. I don't even think she was in the outline at all. It was just when I got to the section on the boat, and Callista's like, I need someone for Callista to talk to who's not like Ledros or Hecarim, or I need someone for her to talk to.
And people actually love her, right? Because I have like a lot of. Actually, I have one person, Rixalis, Annika. It's like the person that I talk most to law, because I do some law YouTube videos, and she is like, I think if Riot doesn't make her a champ at some point, she will come to the headquarter and convince people personally. So I think actually this is
I
one
like
of the.
her already.
Yeah, it seems like people actually, and I had that sometimes in the Twitch chat when I last time talked about the book. So I think something like that actually got people heavily invested into it, and kind of fun that this wasn't even planned.
Yeah, and she became one of my favorite characters too. Like I needed her just for one scene. I was thinking just to talk to Callista, and then like her voice just sort of clicked straight away. And it's like, she's fun. And so like I put her into a bit more. And then it's just like, she's not going to stay on the boat. She's going to want to go out and take part in these adventures. I'm like, let's see what happens for that. And like she sort of just elbowed her into the story, which is very much in her character. So that was a lot of fun. Similarly, Gender Kaya, one of the other characters, she was in the outline. She served a very sort of functional role of like she needs to explain some stuff really about stuff. I won't go into all of that here for spoilers, but like it was only during the writing of it that I think she started to really come to life too. So those two became two of my favorite characters in writing. But yeah, so back to your original question. So yeah, it probably took maybe 5 months or something like that to get the outline all agreed upon. You need to get a lot of people across the company to say yes to it. Then I basically shut myself in a room for 4 or 5 months, typing frantically, get the first draft done, send that out. It was nice to get that done before Christmas, so I could have like phew, that's done. Have a couple of weeks break, and then start getting feedback the next year. And yeah, doing different feedback rounds. So we did like 3 or 4 different rounds of feedback, which yeah, so it took like doing those next drafts were probably the better part of like, it wasn't like I was doing it 9 to 5 every day. It was kind of like send out that next draft, people go and read it, it takes a while, come back like, I don't know, a month or two later with like, okay, now we need to get into the next round of feedback. And that little distance is actually very useful. It's hard to see, like when you're in the middle of writing something, it's hard to see it. It's like you start losing perspective. Like, is this any good? I don't know. Is this scene bad scene? And then the editor's like, that's my favorite scene. I'm like, oh, okay, that's awesome. So putting things aside and then being able to look at it with fresh eyes is actually very useful. You can look at things and go, oh, this is actually really cool. I should build this up a little bit more. Or I'm like, what was I thinking? These lines don't work at all. But it's a lot easier to see it almost like it's not your writing, it's someone else's writing, which is easier to critique.
For sure, yeah.
So yeah, having that little bit of distance is useful. But yeah, so there's quite a few different rounds. So that took another, I'm not even sure exactly how long, but yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So actually, when you decided to pitch this to write, like, how can we imagine that? Because when you said like, yeah, I went to my room for 5 months, and then you are missing in your normal part of your job, no? So did you actually get the support, or was this like you started it part-time, coming home from work from ride and then writing about the ride? How can we imagine that? Because I think it's quite some time.
Yeah, I was very lucky. So I've been working for a part of a company called Narrative Services, and so that's not like. So I used to work on the lead team. Then I used to run the world building team where we did like a lot of the fleshing out of what the different cultures were like and stuff. For the last few years, I've been part of the narrative services team, and it's kind of like a little team of writers and editors that can get loaned out to different teams who might not have their own narrative staff across the company. And we can sort of get borrowed, like other teams can borrow us for a little bit of time, saying, oh, we need some help with X. We need a little bit of help on this project for like a few months. We don't need to hire someone full time, but we could really do with some narrative support on this. And this was me being on loan to the books team, basically. So the books team like worked out all their and they were the ones that worked out all the publishing deal and all that kind of stuff. And they worked out all the strategy, and they were the ones that were syncing with the rest of the company, going, okay, the company was building to do a big event moment with the Ruination, and they're going, let's jump on that and do a book as part of that. And I got sort of yanked in to be a part of it. I was quite happy to be yanked in to do it because I was super excited for it.
Yeah, sure. How big
so
is
I was
the
kind of like,
book
cool,
team?
on loan.
How big is the big team?
Only small. The books team is only a very small team.
So yeah, I saw the Reddit armor. I think it was like a few people already. So not that big. So isn't there a lot of pressure? Because how I normally watch everything evolve in our scene, it's like you always have this pilot case. I'm not sure if it's called it in English as well, but like do it one time, make it work, and then we can do more. So you're working for the book team on loan, doing the first real novel. And if this is shit, sorry, then they can't do any more work probably. So did you feel that pressure to perform because these guys heavily depend on it? Let's be honest.
Oh yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think it's fair to say. Um, I was also going into it as a knowing like guinea pig, essentially. Um, it was like I was kind of the test case in a sense of like we got to work out the pipeline, we got to work out the processes as well. Um, it was a new thing, and it was like, and we were working with an external publisher as well, which was like a new relationship that was being set up. But yeah, I mean, if the book had been bad, if the like we wouldn't have published, we wouldn't have gone forward. I mean, I wasn't the one going to be judging that, so
Yeah,
it's just
sure, okay.
like here it is, do with it what you will. If it gets published, great. If it doesn't, it'll be a bummer. But I could also understand it. But yeah, I didn't want to hand across something that was bad.
Yeah, I mean, you
So
probably never want to do that, but I mean, sometimes you do hand something in, it's the best work you can do. It actually gets published, and then people don't buy it. And I think, at least in Germany, from what I saw, it actually got quite a good start, and it's actually still going. I just saw last time I did the stream after that, someone sent me like, "Oh, look, it's on place one at the moment. It's getting higher. Let's go." So would you say, I'm not sure how much you can actually comment on that, but would you say that was a success coming from what your expectation was, and can we maybe because of that expect more books?
I mean, it's hard for me to say because I'm not the businessy person on the team that's making those calls and stuff. I think everyone was pretty happy with how it's going. I think everyone's really happy with how it's gone down with League fans. That it feels true to these characters. And it's really nice to get messages from folks that'll be like, "Oh, I'm a massive Kalista fan, and I love this." It's really cool. Um, I mean, I want to see more books. I can't say yes or no or what we're
Yeah,
doing
for sure.
exactly. I would love to see more. I'm a big reader, so it's like I'm not saying I want to write them all. I won't certainly have time. I want to read them. Like um, we've got some great writers on board, and there's also like great writers out in the world who also love this IP. So like yeah, I would love to read more books. I just want to read more stories and experience more stories in this IP. Like I think Arcane was really good for whetting people's appetite, um, and making people go, oh, this is really good. Like I've had a lot of friends who like are like lapsed League players or never knew anything about League, but they're like, oh, that Arcane show, that's fantastic. That's the company you work for, isn't it? So yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, I think I just want to see more stories, just in all formats. I want to watch more stories on TV. I want to see films. I want to read comics. I want to read books. I want to play games. Um, but yeah, so hopefully more of that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the timeline is saying it, right? Like, when you look back 5 years, this timeline that we at the moment have is already crazy for me. And if we go ahead 5 more years, I think it will be huge. Like, Arcane was obviously brutal in the impact. I never had so much people talking with me about League of Legends. I was like, okay, guys, I have to read a lot more lore before we can talk this, because I was always the competitive guy. I didn't really care why Anivia did what she did. It was most important that her AP scaling was zero point 0.9 on E, and I knew more of this stuff, so I see that. Yeah, coming to an end, actually, tomorrow I'm going to talk with Christian Linke about storytelling
Oh,
in,
cool.
in big IP. I
Yeah, nice.
actually,
Say hello. Say hello to him
yeah,
for me.
yeah. I actually, when I talked with him, like way before I did this placement, he actually mentioned you by name, which was like really crazy for my head. Like a few months later, when I actually got the chance to read it, I was like, "Oh my god, is this Adrian Reynolds? Oh my god, so much made sense." Because he actually we talked about storytelling and helping to get all this lore into place. So can you maybe, just for a head teaser for tomorrow, did you work together, and what did you actually have a part in Arcane as well? How can we imagine lore working out in this company together?
Not directly. So like Christian's great. He's like such a talented, such a passionate guy, and he just loves this IP. I was working on the world building team while they were working on Arcane. So I wasn't involved directly in any of it, but some of the work that my team was working on was kind of going at the same sort of time. So like my team was working on things like, what does Piltover and Zorn look like? What's the shape language? What do they dress like? Like, all that kind of stuff. What do they drink? All those kind of world building like essentials that make this world feel more lived in and more real. And Arcane used some of that stuff and like pushed it, like far beyond and made it look amazing. But a lot of the essential kind of work was being done by some of the very talented artists on the world building team. So I was kind of working in parallel a little bit and getting to see some of that stuff. But yeah, wasn't able to work directly onto it. But it was always such a thrill being able to see, like, every now and again we'd get pulled into like a theater and we go, we get to see a little bit more of, like, we'll see an animatic, seeing it all like right from the start. Got to read some of the early scripts and stuff like that, and seeing it start to come together and seeing the work that Fortiche does, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this stuff is just unbelievably beautiful. It's pretty amazing, that show. Like, it just looks so stunning.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward for the cinematic version of Ruination. Like, the whole 1.5 hour movie coming up soon, I believe.
That'd be sweet. Yeah, I'd be up for that. That sounds good.
I mean, we got some nice cinematics, right, from the Ruination event. So don't want to be greedy, but I would love to see the book actually going out as a movie at some day. Thank you so much for your time, right? I think this would be like perfect. I always have the feeling, back in the days, right, I always said we are gamers doing stuff for gamers, and I got so much heavy flashback on this sentence when I talked to you, because I actually 100% believe that you are one of these guys. I believe that you are a huge nerd in the positive way that it can be. And I'm so glad that we actually made it work and got the time. And I'm really looking forward to more books as well. I wouldn't mind if it's from you, because I love this one. And my parents also, so greetings from them as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for saying that. That's very kind. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, then have a good sleep, actually, right? And I hope that you actually get some of that. I mean, you played League of Legends from season 2, and so you are used to having no sleep, but I still would give it some.
That's true. I'll try. Yeah, cool. Well, you have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much. See ya.
Cheers, mate. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
Take it easy, meine Damen und Herren. Das war tatsächlich das Interview mit Anthony Reynolds. Sehr, sehr nice. Ich habe lange kein englisches Interview mehr gemacht. Früher für die Prime League, ist lange her. Wenn ihr dieses Buch auschecken wollt, dann entweder Link in der Beschreibung oder Ausrufezeichen Buch, einfach, falls ihr im Twitch dabei seid. Peace out. Euer Johnny.